So even with a flat top instrument like this, it makes sense to add a little bit of curve into the, I don't know, the profile of it. Partially just because it's nice for there to be some room for the guitar to flex. Like if it's totally flat and say your environment changes enough that the top would get stretched one way or the other, this gives it some room for it to do that stretching, to flatten out a little bit and not pull apart the joinery. But I'm also kind of a person who doesn't like I have a really small shop. I don't like too much specialized equipment or like sanding dishes, or I don't even really like to use forms. I just free bend these things. Because if I spent my whole life just making these forms, it's such a waste of material to me, and really locks you into making stuff that's that form. So what I've opted to do instead is I curve my braces and then clamp them onto my thin plate here, and that gives some curve to the top, which eventually gets a little bit flattened out once you glue the whole thing up. But that's okay. I've added that little bit of curve and that little bit of slack in the top to help it, be free to pump and move and change with the weather.
So if someone asks me, like, how much radius is in one of my tops, my answer has to be, like, I don't know, an amount. It doesn't really matter. Who are we trying to impress? Like people on an internet forum with our guitars? Or are we trying to make something that's interesting, cool, maybe fun to play? And don't get me wrong, I think it's great that there are people out there upholding traditional ways of building things. But just because a factory instrument is cool doesn't mean that you have to think like a factory when you're building things on your own. It should be whatever you want to build. And if those methods are getting in your way, don't engage with them. Don't do them. There are lots of ways to skin a cat.
Like, I didn't get into this guitar building game to see if I could copy a factory. Like, I'd work for a factory if I wanted to do that. The fact is, I kind of like that I'm free-forming these things. It opens my mind while I'm doing it. Like, I don't want to be just stuck doing the same thing over and over and over again in the hopes that I'm perfecting something. What is that? What is perfection? Like, I understand going for something in your life. I understand wanting to achieve things, but perfection? Give me a fucking break. Who do you think you are? The only thing we should be trying to perfect is our relationships with each other. Not the thing you do by yourself in your basement. Try to go on a perfect walk. There are ways to do this that make it a fulfilling, enjoyable process, because God knows there's no financial reward in doing this sort of stuff. I think craft is very important, but I think it is up to the craftsperson to decide what that craft is, right? And how they want to engage with it. If you start looking into the history of things, it becomes very readily apparent, that's backwards, that there is no right way to do things. There are just different ways to do things. And if you think you've stumbled on the right way, good for you. And that's probably the right way for you, but you have to keep that in mind. It's for you. And somebody else doing something different, it's not a threat. What a joy. Look at the amazing things that we're all able to do. There are going to be people out there in these comments telling me that the way I'm doing what I'm doing is bound to fail because I'm doing it wrong. But they don't know any more than I do about this stuff. People who spend their times on forums talking about guitars are not spending their time playing those guitars. So who cares what they think? The world is enormous and full of all kinds of ways to make music. And if you're true to yourself and if you make things that you think are good, people are going to respond to that. And you're going to find people that want to play your instruments. People will seek you out for your talents because you're unique. A factory can't do what you do. This world's too big for the concept of best. There is no best, there's only different.